company law. So the course itself is a walk through company law. And the structure of it will be an introduction to the Business Association Form, and that's what we're doing right now. Then we'll look at creating the company, incorporating the company, and writing its articles, which will be the constitution, the internal constitution of the company. And then we'll look at how, because the company is its own person, the directors represent the company in their dealings with the outside world. That's the first part of the course. The next part of the course will look at financing the company, and that's what Hong Kong's economy circles around. Hong Kong has an economy which, as you know, began as a trade center, and the port of Hong Kong, the logistics companies of Hong Kong, the shipping companies of Hong Kong are a very important part of the economy. And another central pillar of the Hong Kong economy is Hong Kong as financial center. And the financing that takes place here is largely financing of companies. That's what stock exchanges do. And so we'll look at financing the company in the second major segment of the course, beginning in Lecture 4, and we'll look at financing the company by issuing shares. Then we will look at classes of shares, because that's a very interesting, a very delicate, and an area which is something that is enjoyable to study, and you can use your creativity as a lawyer to structure classes of shares, rights and duties of shares in a way that suits your client's needs. And so I think that you'll find, especially as a student of law, the classes of shares interesting, because you can understand in a sort of a microcosm of the world how the rights and duties of a particular person shape that person's place in the world, and that if those rights and duties are adjusted, the person enjoys a different position in the world. And when joining a company, because a person is buying into it, in the small world of a company, shareholders sometimes can demand that they have particular and special rights and duties, and that will be a class of shares. Then we'll look at financing the company by taking out loans. And loans can be taken out from a bank, or loans can be taken out by selling IOUs, sort of a debt instrument that has to be repaid. And they look a bit like shares of stock because they're negotiable instruments, but they do not establish ownership. They rather establish an evidence debt of the company. Now, there is a problem because, remember, as I mentioned before, the debts of the company are not the debts of the owner of the company. That's limited liability. And because the liability is limited, the creditors are in a relatively dangerous position because they don't control the company. And so we'll look as well at how sometimes, in very rare circumstances, the company can be disregarded. That is, as a separate person from the members. And that's called piercing the corporate veil. After this second segment of the course, we'll turn to corporate governance. And the most famous aspect of corporate governance are the directors, the board of directors, their duties to the company, and the governance of their behavior. Beyond that, we'll look to how those duties can be enforced by taking the directors to court, and taking them to court because they breached a duty to the company, not because they've damaged the shareholder who's actually bringing the action. And so because the damage goes to the company, but the shareholder brings the action, what we call this is a derivative action because the shareholder's right derives from the damage which is being done to the company. And then we'll look at another aspect of governance, which is how do you take potentially hundreds or thousands of people who all own shares in the company and organize the way that they make decisions. This is a form of democracy. The shareholders have voting rights. And when many people, as I said, thousands potentially, exercise their rights, we need to organize that in a very clear way. And generally speaking, we have meetings held at least annually, and then votes cast on particular ballot items that are on the agenda for that meeting. Also, among shareholders, we can have unfair behavior. And so we first of all make sure that the shareholders are informed and they know what other shareholders are doing, and they also know what the directors are doing, and they understand what they are voting on. And then if some shareholders use their power to prejudice the rights of other shareholders, to dominate them, and to engage in legal activity which is, however, unfair given the circumstances, then we have another kind of access to court, which is the unfair prejudice action. And then finally, we'll look at the very important aspect of the foreign companies in Hong Kong. About 88% of the companies listed on the Stock Exchange of Hong Kong are foreign. They're not incorporated under the law that we'll study in this course. And it's very important in Hong Kong both to allow those companies to operate in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong is an international trade and finance center, and to make sure that these companies do not hurt local persons or the local economy. And so we have a cluster of legal provisions in Hong Kong, as well as case law, which reaches this balance of inviting the foreign companies to Hong Kong in order to finance themselves, to do business, to engage in transactions, and also to make sure that they do not damage persons in Hong Kong, whether those persons be local or foreign, or damage the Hong Kong economy or its reputation for rule of law. And that will complete the course. So you see, part 1, we'll look at the nature of the entity. Part 2, we'll look at the financing of the entity. Part 3, we'll look at the governance of the entity. And finally, just on the edge of this, we will have an assortment of issues, including the information provided to govern the entity better, a specialized action for fairness among shareholders in the entity, and then some rules on bringing foreign companies under the jurisdiction of Hong Kong law. So today, we'll look at the forms of business associations, and we won't begin with a company. I'll present another form of business association that will allow you to understand what's so special about the company. And you have heard about partnerships, and that's where we'll begin. And the partnerships are relatively simple, and I think with this lecture alone, you'll be able to have a fairly clear understanding of what a partnership is and how it generally operates. And we'll discuss that, including the limited partnership. And then we'll go to the company limited by shares, is where we'll spend nearly all of our time in this course. There are certain problems of delegation of power in the company, and we call those agency problems. And then we'll look at, in a very introductory way, the mechanisms of company law, which are designed to address these agency problems. And those mechanisms will be essentially the content of the third and fourth parts of this course. One thing in company law that I hope you will understand is please do not be myopic. Please do not look only at what you're reading for a given week, a given part of the course, but take a few minutes each week to step back and understand how what we're studying fits into the vehicle of the company, the structure of the company, and what it means as a function. Because I think not I think, it's definitely proven that if you know why you're studying something and what that thing that you're studying does in a larger connection, then you'll both grasp it faster and remember it longer. Take a look at these. I'll flash up some letters and get ready. Use your best memory and see if you can get these letters and remember them after this. Now here they come. Do you remember them? I'll give you the same letters again, flash them up, and you see if you remember them. I'm just reordering them slightly. And I gave you a much quicker flash. Did you understand the letters? Did you remember the letters this time? So that's the point I'm making is please do just take a minute, step back, think about why you're studying this in this course. Think about how individual items we're studying fit in to the company structure, to the overall course. You can use the slide that I just explained a moment ago. You can look at the course outline. You can look at the arrangement of the outline in Open edX, and in this way you'll see why you're studying something, and I think that will help you grasp it much faster and remember it much longer.